Hey, what's up? Alright, here we are. We're back. Dreading this next segment. Not necessarily, well, yeah, I'm dreading this segment. I'm dreading this next situation where we have to figure out some difficult problems. So, let's just jump right into that. And so we stopped here at 373 in Client Refactor. And what we're doing is we're going through this file. We're refactoring the client file to include database save system, right? So let's go over here. First, I wanted to do this. Let's make sure that our core game is still working. We're gonna open up 3 terminals, which now we're gonna go to extensions, restart for our git lens. Right, so now we're gonna crank up the server, iServer. Same thing, but for the client, we're gonna crank up a client. We're gonna say L for local, and hit the button there. Okay, been a minute since I did this, so I'm a little rusty. Okay, L for local. There we go. All right, let's see if this works. Okay, so we're getting waiting other player bug. God, I hate that. Man. I gotta figure out that bug, man. One day I'm gonna fix it, but it is intermittent. It happens sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. And let's see. Why is there only one running? Okay, there we go. There it goes. Alright. Alright, so name here is going to be Joshua. He's ready to play. Now we're going to switch over to the other guy. He's going to be Murfield. Just ignore that ghost card at the top. Don't worry about it. And here we go. And you're hearing 2 double because they're both running separate. This is 2 clients here. You got 2 clients running. Alright, so yeah, as you can see, it still works. I just wanted to verify that. So, let me just note this in devlog. We did a little test here just to make sure it still works like it used to. Tested server and clients. So that's cool. I wanted to make sure of that. Let's go ahead and get our timer. We forgot to set our timer. So we're 5:38, which will just say 6 minutes. So we'll do 62 minutes. Let's go back over here. All right, 62. There it goes. Timer started. All right, here we go. So this is where we stopped. Okay, so now we were going through this file and we're implementing the database. Everything works up until this point, or should work, I believe. We tested most all of it, and now at this point in the client refactor, when we're trying to reconnect, we are basically hitting a roadblock for construction. Use the above retrieved input to connect to proper game through server. And now I'm trying to figure out, what do I need to do next? What's like the best thing for me to do next here? Let's scroll up. Let's look at this. So we have, while true, if client solve disconnect is equal to false, if game ID exists equals 0, not a reconnect. Else, if it is a reconnect. Okay. So if they choose to start a new game here, then they can choose to connect to remote or local. Okay. Right, and then either way we're getting a new client ID and all that, the game ID, because they're starting a new game. Okay, and now we're trying to reconnect. So whenever we go to reconnect, we do this preliminary stuff. We get our data back. We get our client ID, our game ID, our local remote. What's next? What would precede this? Well, what about if it's client 1? If it's client 1, then what? Versus client 2? Well, that would correspond to this code down here. Right here, right? Client ID. Yeah, I feel like we can copy this over. I'm going to try to do as much as I can in this file, or you know what I mean? I don't, kind of avoiding the other section that is the refactor of the like start accepting clients to allow us to connect multiple clients. Instead, try to do as much client refactor as we can. At least a little bit more. So in this case, we would want to run this code, right? Because we already and we haven't assigned this yet, have we? Yeah, we haven't assigned that. So we need to assign this, current client, and then if current client ID, I guess we would want to do all this. Yeah, I guess this is what we would want to do. Change from this by client ID. Global verify proper apply counter logic. And then we do current game, set pygame video mode. And we don't need to do the if ready because that would already be done. Like we already had that data, we don't have to receive it. So obviously we would have to make modifications to the server related to that because I think naturally it would send the client ID and we don't want it to send the situation. So yeah, I guess yeah we would want all this to be run. I would say yes. Copy all this, and then we'll just paste it right in. Okay, this is good, right? I think this is good. Post this up. Look at what it did to the indent. Lord have mercy. Did it do this? I have no idea.
So, what did you want to talk about?
When spring comes, I'm leaving town. I'm going to Midgar. I'm going to be a soldier. The best of the best, like Sephiroth.
Yeah, and I mean, this is fine. I was thinking about how this related to like the database, and since like
What was his name again?
we don't need to load in all of this data from the database on a reconnect, which this section handles. We just need access to all the data eventually. So if we have the client ID, and all we need is the client ID to basically assume a bunch of other things, you know, based off of that ID. Like all this is based off of client ID 1. I don't need to load in all of this from the database. I can just straight up assign it like this. This is preferable, it's faster, it's easier. So yeah, it saves me from having to load it in from the database and save it in the first place. This raises a question of how do we actually have like the saving? Are we gonna make it to where writing this out every single time is a lot?
The source of everything.
Well, not necessarily. Like, what I mean is, after we change anything, we would be inserting it into the database. So if we were, you know, change attribute list, we just set this, how we want to save this, so then we would have to, what is it called, cursor? Yeah, cursor.execute, and then we're gonna have to do insert into save data, and we want to insert all this data in there, and that would basically have to happen after each line. We would just do it again, and then we would do that again, and then we would do it again, and then we would just keep doing it again. And that's one way to do it. But there's another way to do it, and that would be by having what we originally proposed, which was a save thread. That thread would basically I guess we could use the locals and globals access all of these variables. And if we did that, instead of saving each piece of data correctly after each line, after each, each time it was changed, we would instead we would basically just scan the global and local data set to see if any data within it had changed. And if any data changed, we would then save the changed data to the database. And that thread would allow us to leave this code untouched. It would basically just remain exactly as it is, without having, insert line every other line added to this file, at least the section of the file. That is a little bit more work. It's more processing, but it's cleaner. It's definitely less performant, but again, it is cleaner. So it's a trade-off. I really don't like the idea of saving this data after every other line. You know what I mean? I don't like that, because, well, that just means there's gonna be a good bit of code added. It's gonna gum up everything. It's gonna make it hard to understand. It's gonna make it hard to follow, to debug, to read through all this code and everything. Now, most of it is completely debugged, that's true. But I don't think it's 100% perfect. I don't think any code, or 99% of code, is prone to errors at some point. And remember, we had the checkpoint system set up to where we would use the same thing that handles tracebacks to get us the exact line number of whenever we disconnected at, to help us figure out how to properly reconnect without messing up the data. Not easy. So there's a lot of different things that are going on here. It's a big change. So we could see, like, after this, every time we modified the sent data storage dict, we would have to save that. We would want to save this. Irrigation send ID dictionary. 1.1 current client. Yeah, honestly, this is too much. I'm just going through this, and there's no way that I wanna explicitly write in all the saves. It would totally gum up this code. Like, it would just make it pretty hard to read, you know? Yeah, it would be more performant, but like, I'm like, man, I'm not that worried about performance, honestly. That is just too extra. That is, you know, if we're running like World of Warcraft or some shit like that, where we need every little drip of performance that we could get, you know, with a game that has like thousands of players or whatever, but I don't, there's no way. I'm not gonna explicitly add in a save line every one of these lines. What? You're doing it. So the easy way to do this would use a save thread that constantly scans locals and globals. big challenge, baby. Holy shit. Man, I'm not gonna lie, this is stressful how hard this is. This is not easy. Whew. This is a big boy project, bro. This is not some simple shit anymore. Not by a long shots. Yeah, and I guess this would need to run on a reconnect. I think it would. Because I mean, it makes sense that not inclined. Why is this not inclined? Inclined, but it should be inclined as well. Anything. Name is equal to main. Safeguard against SSRCS being errantly set to CS when client pi is imported into server pi after server pi sets SSRCS. Safeguard against SSRCS being errantly set to CS when server pi. Okay, right. That's why we have if name is main. It's to be executed to file because import to allow it for init, etc. Why is global error? This global flag counter logic. Global this. Like it runs fine, but it's not inclined. I'm just like, why is it not? Oh, it is. Why is it not showing up? Really? I'm an idiot? Ah, man, I'm brain dead. Big dumb. It was there. In front of my eyes. I couldn't see it. That's embarrassing. Anyway, it's there. Cool. And why were we checking that? Okay, right, because we wanted to just... We did, okay. If client ID int is equal to 1. It's passed to setup. Locate game object. Yeah, we need all this to be run. Or reconnect. If it's a soft... It's a soft disconnect. Then I would say we could if it was a soft disconnect, we would still have data already, right? If this was a soft disconnect, this would already have been run. Yeah, soft disconnects are completely different. Like soft disconnect, all the data still be set properly. Just like have to handle the read back into the game. Getting it back like at the section of the game that it disconnected. That's the problem. Hard disconnect, would need to rerun this because all this data would be lost. So this would only need to be disconnect. Let me add that in. Yeah, I'm pretty certain it would. So how do we determine if it was a hard disconnect? That's another question. How do we know if it was a hard disconnect? So let's think about this. If we disconnected and it was a hard DC, I'm not honestly sure like how that works as far as what gets run in a file. You know what I mean? Like if we just snap out of a, if the computer just turns off immediately, I don't think, like, you know, there wouldn't be enough time for the computer to run the rest of some block of code to change like some boolean called hard disconnect to true. You know, it's not that simple. If we determined, like, I feel like the only way to determine if something was a hard disconnect would be to distinguish between what it was not. Meaning, Well, how do we garner that knowledge of, well, we would know if it was a reconnect because we would already have game ID and stuff saved. So like if it was a reconnect and it wasn't a soft disconnect, then we know it was a hard disconnect. Does that make sense? I don't know if there's another way to deduce that we had a hard disconnect just by knowing, like, by having code execute upon a hard disconnect, because you can't have code execute on a hard disconnect. The point of a hard disconnect is that it is abrupt and forceful and basically random as far as when it occurs. You never know. You can't really plan for it. So it's kind of like you have to have some setting. You just have to have another way to deduce that information. You can't deduce it directly. You have to indirectly deduce the information. And I think the way to do that would be to, yeah, if we had a soft, could we just, well, if we had a soft disconnect, then we know it's a soft disconnect, right? If we had a soft disconnect, that would, see, now this is another question though. What if we have a hard DC and it triggers the soft DC setting to true? I don't think it would work like that. Let me ask ChatGPT a couple things about this, but I'm gonna put this as a note. I think we might be on the right track here. Can't directly deduce if hard DC because it's so abrupt, random, forceful. There isn't a way to trigger some bool to directly tell us yes or no. Instead, we would have to indirectly deduce info via perhaps one, if it wasn't a soft DC and it was a reconnect. Meaning, if we know it's a reconnect and we know it's not a soft DC, then we can be quite certain it is a hard DC. Let's just pass this to the old Chat GPT and see what sort of wisdom they have for us. To determine if a disconnection was a hard disconnection instead of a soft disconnection, you can follow an indirect approach by analyzing patterns of behaviors related to the event. So typically happens gracefully or temporarily, such as when a network issue causes a rejob, the system is able to reconnect or recover without requiring a reset or intervention. It might also be due to a timeout or a gentle closure of a session or connection, allowing for a smooth reconnection. A hard disconnection as a hard DC, a more abrupt event where the connection is forcibly terminated, typically without a clean shutdown. This could be caused by a physical disconnect, device shutting down unexpectedly, or forceful network reset. It may require more effort or intervention to reestablish the connection. Indirect deduction strategy. Based on your outline, here's how we might approach determining whether a disconnection was hard. If there's a reconnection after the disconnection, this gives us a clue. However, just the presence of reconnection doesn't confirm whether the system is soft or hard. We need to check the nature of the reconnection. If it happens quickly and the system resumes without needing to perform additional recovery steps like restart and indicate a soft DC. Verifying if it wasn't a soft DC, timeout behavior. The disconnection occurred after a significant delay or failure to establish the connection automatically and the system or device needs intervention. It could suggest that the DC was not soft. If the disconnection occurred after a significant delay or failure to reestablish the connection, if the disconnection occurred after a significant delay, failure to reestablish the connection automatically, it could suggest that the DC was not solved. Error logs or codes. Link specific error codes or message related network drops can help. My DC out in 1 second. By soft DC, I mean errors within a main while loop triggered via try except, which would cause a DC but would allow the script to remain open and re-establish connection without restarting the script. Upon exception, it would trigger soft DC bool equal true, which would verify soft DC. Hard DC would refer to accidentally clicking X and closing software, power outage, network outage, script termination, client script, or server crash. Give me ideas on how to specifically deduce if it was a hard DC. Thanks for clarifying. Given this obvious such an and track separate to script to reconnect after starting an hard DC closure. Monitor for process termination or unexpected closure. If your script or client application is still running, a hard DC might imply the process was terminated unexpectedly. The method would be to monitor the process in the background. If the process is no longer running when the DC happens, it's likely a hard DC. You could do a process manager to check if the script is still alive. Okay, there we go. Now we're getting somewhere. That would actually verify it. Set up a heartbeat or periodic logging within the script. The heartbeat stops unexpectedly. The script might have been terminated. Okay, I think honestly, but wouldn't it be logical and more simple to assume that if it wasn't a soft DC and it was a reconnect, that would only leave the possibility of a hard DC? This approach has simplified logic considerably. If you can definitively determine that it wasn't a soft connection, and you observe that a reconnection attempt occurred afterward, then it would be reasonable to assumption that the disconnection must have been a hard DC. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I understand. Yeah, this is the way to do it. Um, after review, quite certain this is a solid and simple solution. But implies we need to add in code that ensures database is cleared whenever a game is finished, so we don't errantly assume we are reconnecting. Plus, we need to add in code that ensures DB is clear whenever a game is finished, so we don't errantly assume we're reconnecting. Because currently, that's how we know that we're reconnecting, right? We use the database to see if the client ID and game ID already exist. So basically, like once we start a game, we get that information and we immediately save it to the database. And from that point until the game is over, that data is in the database. Whether we have a hard DC, whatever, it's going to be there. So whenever we reconnect and we check that database, we know, hey, we're reconnecting, or like we were disconnected in some way or another, and there's an unfinished game that we have been connected to. Yeah, and then that just lets us know that we are reconnecting, but it doesn't tell us whether it was a soft disconnect or a hard disconnect. But if the soft disconnect hasn't been triggered, then we can assume that it is that it was a hard disconnect, right? Yeah, I feel like those things alone would 99.9% give us almost complete certainty and code security. Yeah. What do you need to add in code that ensures DB is clear whenever games finish or early assume we're reconnecting? Yeah, I think this is a solid solution, guys. I don't think there's anything wrong with this at all. I think this is what we should do. So how do we word this exactly in code terms for running this setup line? So let's like trim this down. We'll say so we can say if client.soft disconnect is equal to false, and well, we would also need We also need something that says it's a reconnect. We need those two things. Well, aren't we already in the section of reconnect? Wait a second. If game ID exists, okay. All right, so then we could have a variable here. Right here we would say basically if it is a reconnect. So we know if game ID exists, then it is a reconnect. We could say we could have just a boolean called is reconnect. Equals true. But this implies it would have to exist prior. So we need to do client.isReconnect. And we'll need to create this. Need to there goes the timer, boys. $397 in client refactor. So let's cd out to the root directory. Now we're going to git branch to ensure we're on the right branch, which we are. Now we're going to git commit -m. We're going to double quotes, there we go. Now we successfully committed. We're going to do git push canasta secondary. So now we're going to push to this remote repository. There we go. So that's done. Now we're going to go to our local backup and we're going to take care of that. So let's go here. Alright, there we go. Alright dudes, so I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna log off here. I'm gonna go get a little coffee drink. Need a little bit of caffeine in my system, baby. So overall, I'm happy with the progress. It's just hard, man. This is not easy. This is a really difficult part that I'm going through of this figuring out this code. Super delicate, like very. I got like 10 different trains of thought in my mind for 10 different like systems that have to remain integrated with each other. You know, and it has to be done perfectly. It can't be like almost perfect. It has to be absolutely perfect in coding. It's either perfect or it's not. And so it's that plus you have to make sure like, you know, you're doing what needs to be done next and not like skipping a step, which could cause you to like have to undo work that you did, which just results in wasted time. So there's a lot of thinking that goes on, and there's a lot less coding, and it's really stressful. It's just not easy. It's difficult. It's very difficult. So not going to be doing a lot of lines here over the next probably week. It's going to be more delicate and thinking and brainstorming. And as a project gets bigger, you will notice there's a lot less coding and a lot more brainstorming and double checking things. And that's just the way it is. There's really no way around it, especially since it's just me working on it. I couldn't imagine actually having like 5 other people to work with on a project. I feel like it would just be a nightmare if I'm gonna be straight up honest. I would not want to deal with that. I can imagine that would just be unbelievably difficult and frustrating and just a nightmare. So yeah, anyway, I'm gonna go get a coffee. Hope you guys have a good weekend. I'm probably not gonna code tomorrow because I have work. Work longer on Saturdays, but maybe Sunday I'll code a little. Maybe not. But if not Sunday, I'll see you Monday. So enjoy your weekend and be safe.